When designing a combat system, what do you think the most important thing to consider is? Most people would probably say the way that you deal damage, or offense. Stuff like the weapons you use, what abilities your character has, the general way that you go about asserting dominance to crush your enemies. However, I think there's another side to this coin. A side that I think gets underrepresented in the discussions of video games and is also just that little bit more important. You can trust me, I'm British. Defense is something that's generally thrown to the wayside when people talk about video games. You bring up the topic and all people want to talk about is big damage, explosion go boom, guy kick ball with feet really good. But there's more to video games than meat shots and fucking infinites. In fact, you may be surprised to hear this, but there's another person on the end of that punching bag. How do they feel? Can they get out of this situation? Could they have avoided this, or should they have given up from the start? Well, if you answered no, then maybe this game could use a few more defensive mechanics. I would personally say that the way you go about preventing damage is more important than how you deal damage in combat-focused games. And the way that these tools are made affect everything about the game in major and minor ways. Just a few small tweaks and you can create an entirely different game. But how is that? Why is defense so important? Can you really back up this argument, or are you just British and sound correct? Well, I can definitely try. So let's talk about how defense defines games. So, let's start with one of the most popular defensive techniques to ever exist.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this.
The third strike parry is iconic for multiple reasons. But one of those is the instantly recognizable features of it. By pressing forward in a 10-frame window, your character will strike a pose, flash white, cause this sound to play, and completely avoid all incoming damage from the attack. You can parry every strike in this game with this technique, only losing to throws. Your time you parry too early, you'll still get hit, and you always have a 23-frame window between parry attempts, which is just over 1/3 of a second. You can even parry while you're in the air, however the timing is much tighter than when you're on the ground. The benefit of the first strike parry is pretty obvious. You recover much faster from the attack, you take 0 damage from chip, and you're not pushed back from the attack at all. Not to mention, it makes you look really cool. The downside is also extremely obvious. You have to give up the safer option of blocking by literally pressing forward in order to parry, meaning if you mistime it, you're gonna find yourself on the bad end of a beatdown. This can generally be seen as the normal function of parrying in most video games. It's a type of defensive technique that has you go on the offensive, creating more risk, but giving you more reward. And it can be displayed in a bunch of different ways. Sticking with fighting games for a moment, Guilty Gear Strive has a similar feature to Third Strike's parry system, but it works differently. Instant blocking is a feature that can be found all over the Guilty Gear franchise. However, in Strive, they've altered its abilities just a little bit. If you block an incoming attack within 2 frames of an attack connecting, you get an instant block. This works kind of similar to First Strike's parry, in which you take no chip damage, your character flashes a different color for a second, and you take no pushback, with the noticeable differences being the lack of cool sound. Unless you mod it in. Parry, 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 parry. There's also the differences of inputs. For Guilty Gear Strive's instant block, you have to press block as soon as it happens, whereas Third Strike parry has you completely drop the block and go for a forward input. This technically makes IBs a lot safer than parries, since if you mistime it, you still get to block. The punishment for being too early is not as harsh, and the punishment for being late is... okay, well, the punishment for being late can be quite harsh. But isn't keeping your defense up kind of against the point of the parry? There has to be some other move that encompasses the parry better, right? Oh my god, my lovely wife! Hi, Bicon. Hi. Hi, Bicon. Hi. Hi! Bicon's parry is closer to Third Strike's and generally follows the same rules that the other parries do, being that you have to completely drop your guard in order to get a short window in which you're able to get a bigger reward. In this case, instead of being technical frame data that only nerds like me like, it's something much simpler that everyone can understand. Damage! By successfully using a parry as the opponent strikes you, Bicon grabs the opponent and tosses them to the floor like a wet noodle. I don't know, writing is hard. The input for this is quarter circle forward, punch. Because of this, you have to completely drop your guard and go for a special move input, all of which have nothing to do with you blocking. Not to mention, the parry is only active for the first 7 frames of the animation. Anything after will have you take a massive counter hit for big damage. This retains the risk-reward of a parry, but emphasizes it in different ways. If you miss a parry in third strike, you're gonna get hit, but you won't get a counter hit combo. You miss a parry with Baiken, you're gonna be taking a full counter hit combo. Depending on the starter, that can be a lot of damage. But it still follows the same philosophy that a parry does. Causes you to drop your guard, it gets the opponent off of you, and yes, it even has a satisfying sound. Oh, yes! But what if we had a stance like this that also rewarded you for hitting a perfect timing? Do any of you hear Devil May Cry music? It is my genuine belief that character action games are the peak of human evolution. For thousands of years, we existed on this earth for one sole purpose, so that one day a generation of people can experience playing a game as an overpowered demigod beating the ever-living shit out of some vaguely evil force while the entire world hangs in the balance. You may be too young to have explored the world, too old to explore the stars, but you're the perfect age to get the entirety of the Devil May Cry series on PC for like $50, which is a great trade-off if you ask me. We're going to be spending a lot of time on Devil May Cry in this section, but do not worry, I will be bringing up other games when it comes to it. Also, if the gameplay in the background is bad, shut up! You're bad! This shit's hard, dude! Devil May Cry has had an interesting evolution with its defensive techniques. In the first game, your basically only form of defense was to jump when the enemy was about to attack you, or God forbid, stay away and shoot. In Devil May Cry 3, though, the stance system was added, which allowed you to customize Dante's playstyles in different ways. In 4, this was expanded upon by allowing you to switch between all of the different styles during combat, and in 5, Dante's just insanely broken. I don't know how this guy ever got defeated. I mean, this shit seems pretty easy to me, honestly. The 4 styles that Dante has access to are Swordmaster, Gunslinger, Trickster, and Royal Guard. There's a few more that you get access to throughout the various games, but have you genuinely ever met anyone that used the unlockable styles in Devil May Cry 3? Yeah, I use Doppelganger stance, says the person no one invited to anything ever. The styles can be split into offensive and defensive styles. Swordmaster and Gunslinger are both offensive styles, giving you new moves to your melee and ranged weapons, so we won't be focusing much on them today, meaning we're mostly going to be focusing on Trickster and Royal Guard. I would talk about Royal Guard first since we've been talking about parries, but Trickster is the most commonly used style in the Devil May Cry series. This is because DMC3 starts you on it from the get-go, and it's generally the one that's defaultly selected in all the other games. Trickster gives Dante the ability to dash quickly across the ground in a straight line. When you upgrade the style, it gains added properties like being able to dash multiple times, being able to dash in the air, or even steal a page out of Virgil's book and teleport around. The best thing about Trickster is that, like your jump, Dante gains invincibility frames during the first few frames of the activation, allowing you to cancel into the dodge on reaction and get yourself out of sticky situations. Dodges like this are extremely common all over character action games. In fact, some games have made this their central focus. Looking at Bayonetta for a second. Sorry, I thought I'd give you a heads up on what I was doing. Bayonetta's defining mechanic is the Witch Time dodge, where if you dodge an attack just as it's about to hit you, you enter a slowed down state where you're able to counter-attack freely. There's multiple ways to enter Witch Time, however, having it be on a successful dodge encourages the player to approach the game in a specific way, that being, dodge the fucking attacks! This is also extended by the fact that you're not able to block in this game. Some weapons have defensive techniques you can use, but there's no dedicated block button. The developers want you to flow through the battlefield, almost as as if you're dancing around the angels. The strength of movement tools for defense generally feels underappreciated. The ability to quickly move your character from one spot in the game world to another is extremely powerful and can get you out of some sticky situations. While that is a very good character action example of this, I think we're going to need to talk about it a little bit later. So look at something like Team Fortress 2. More specifically, the Scout. Scout is considered to be one of the best classes in the game, despite having the lowest health pool out of any of the characters. Well, okay, tied lowest health pool, I guess, and technically some characters can get it lower, but we're not talking about them. Scout's defining ability is his speed. He's able to move around the map extremely quickly, as well as being able to double jump. So if he finds himself in any sticky situation, he's able to readjust exactly where he is on a moment's notice. The best scouts are like flies. They're extremely hard to track down and extremely hard to touch, since they're buzzing around the entire place. Just because Scout has low HP doesn't mean he's not able to defend himself. In fact, most fights against a Scout have them being able to kill you pretty quickly because they can hit you while you can't hit them. So as you can see, being able to dodge and weave out of attacks is an extremely powerful part of this game. But there's something else that Devil May Cry has that other character action games don't. Something that sets it a little bit higher up than other ones. Oh man, I wonder what it is. It's a parry! Of course it's a fucking parry! Royal Guard is the blocking stance that Dante has. Dante puts up his guard and begins absorbing some damages from the enemy's attacks. If Dante holds the guard, he unfortunately doesn't block all of the damage. Unless it's in Devil May Cry 5, but you lose Devil Trigger Gauge instead. And if you ask me, that might be worse. Just kill me. Don't take the funny install. Just fucking kill me. At a glance, Royal Guard is kind of mid compared to the other stances. Why would I want to gain the ability to block when I can simply dodge or, you know, do more damage? There's more to the style than just turning the game into an NRS fighting game. Those of you with functioning eyes in the audience may have noticed the circle around the Royal Guard icon. And for those of you who have me tapped out in the background, hey! I work hard on these visuals! Come on, stop watching Family Guy and pay attention to me! This is a bar. Okay, you can go back to watching Family Guy, actually. When you successfully block an attack with Royal Guard, you're able to fill the bar up a little bit. Once you get at least a section of the bar filled up, you can spend it on a powerful attack while still in the stance. Here's the neat thing, though. There's something that I've been hiding from you this whole time. You can actually make this block not shit by being good at the game. If you guard as you're about to get hit, you'll get Royal Block, giving you more gauge, some Devil Trigger meter, no chip damage, and most importantly, style meter. I fucking love style meters, dude. Holy shit. Mastering the timing of your Royal Block is extremely important for getting the most out of this style, as it rewards players for directly learning the timing of different enemies' attacks as well as their patterns. Some enemies have special interactions if you Royal Block them, allowing for unique situations for Dante. The real genius about all of this, though, is how you're actively given a constant stream of choices while playing Dante. If you see a move coming in, you have multiple options. You can keep in the style that you're currently in and try to jump over it, giving you very little reward, but keeping you safe. You can use Trickster to get out and dodge, requiring some timing, but generally leaving you in a better position, or you can try to Royal Guard it, something that requires more skill and precision than the others, but leaves you right in the opponent's face for a counterattack, and has the biggest direct reward out of all of the options. Dante's whole moveset is a masterpiece of design, and I've only been able to talk about a small part of it, but that's because he embodies so many of the concepts that make defense in action games so interesting and involving. Dante has so many options when it comes to dealing with his opponents. So much so that the tools you end up using say more about the person playing the game than it does about the character of Dante. Let's be real, if he was actually playing, he would toy with his opponents constantly. But what if we had a weaker character? What if the monsters you faced were stronger than you and constantly had you on the back foot, putting you against seemingly insurmountable odds? How would you define a defensive system that rewards the player in this context? Well, there's a really popular example of that, actually. The Soulsborne series is renowned for being revolutionary not only to action games, but to video games as a whole. From their ball-crushing difficulty, breathtakingly vague worlds, and level design that ranges from absolutely genius to stop, From Software managed to make their impact on gaming as a whole. I am not a Dark Souls guy. But that doesn't mean I don't respect these games for everything that they've done. And I'm a massive fan of the way that they design their combat system to make you feel outmatched in the best way possible. Also, there is one game from them that I really like, which we'll talk about in a little bit. In Dark Souls and Dark Souls adjacent games, you have a few ways to defend yourself. Rolling is probably the first one that comes to mind. The trickster style's slower, fatter, worse cousin. When you roll, you gain a few brief frames of invincibility, meaning if you roll when the opponent was gonna hit you, you'll completely avoid the attack and take no damage. Sounds good, right? Well, there's a small bit at the end of the roll in which you are completely vulnerable and unable to do anything. This extra recovery is based off your current weight, which is defined by the armor that you're wearing along with the weapon that you have equipped. The lighter your roll is, the better it is, generally, as you recover faster, with the longest of the rolls, lovingly called the fat roll, being the worst thing that you could possibly do. But that's not the smallest part of it. When you roll, you spend some of your stamina, the main resource you use to do basically anything in these games. You spend stamina when you swing your weapon, when you roll, that's about it, and I promise you'll be doing a lot of these things. So you have to make sure that you have enough stamina for the current situation, and if you try to roll without it, your character will freeze like a really attractive woman just said hi to you, and then you have no idea what to do. By linking your main defensive tool to an RPG strat, along with having a finite amount of times that you can use it, the feel of your dodge becomes very different when compared to the types that you see in character action games. More emphasis and thought is put into the way that you use it, and by linking it to the resource that you use to attack, it becomes a meter management decision. Do you have enough meter to be able to roll? Because you're gonna need to smack the guy eventually. But that's not the defensive mechanic that most people know Dark Souls for. No, for the longest time, I remember Dark Souls being defined by the shield. If you're making any kind of media that has to do with medieval fantasy, you're gonna have to put a shield in at some point. Swords and shields are direct signifiers that this is European medieval fantasy. As a big axe enjoyer myself, I personally think rocking a sword and shield is cringe, but I can't deny that they're effective. You're able to use a shield in order to block most of the damage from attacks. Depending on the shield, they'll have different properties, like being able to deflect different attacks from stronger enemies, or being shit. But the general rule of thumb is the bigger and heavier the shield, the more you can guard against without having to worry. Depending on the shield that you use, you may take a bit of chip damage, but blocking attack also causes you to lose stamina based on what you blocked. Blocking an attack that would set your stamina to 0 will cause you to stagger, and you can imagine what comes after that. There is another quality of shields though, and that's the fact that they have a secondary function. I wonder what it is. Yes, we're still talking about parrying. By pressing the alternate attack on the lighter shields, you'll actually swing it at the enemy. While this looks like an attack, it's actually a parry. Successfully parrying an opponent's attack will cause them to stagger, allowing you to get a devastating attack on them. For most enemies, this will cause them to die on the spot. However, on bosses, you might have to get a few of these in. The biggest thing is that not every enemy is parryable. Humanoid enemies can generally be parried, however, most monstrous enemies can't be. As cool as it would be to parry a wolf's bite, it's not exactly practical. Being able to instantly take out an enemy in these games is extremely powerful. And even if you don't go through with the attack, your enemy is forced to be out of combat for a few seconds. When the odds are stacked against you, being able to turn the table so quickly is extremely powerful. But it's here where we can see an important design choice. Think back to Royal Guard for a second. Royal Block has you going into Royal Guard when the attack hits, and parrying has you parry the attack when it's about to hit you. Do you notice the difference here? Dante has a safety net, as if you time it too early, you still go into Royal Guard and simply lose some resources. For John Dark Souls, if you miss the parry, you're wide open and vulnerable. You know what that means. On paper, Dark Souls and Devil May Cry give the players the same defensive tool, a way to avoid the opponent, a block that costs some resources, and a parry. However, it's in the context around them that changes the game feel dramatically. Trick isn't going to become shorter and gain more recovery because you're using more weapons, and you're not going to suddenly be able to parry the giant dog because you believed hard enough. Hell, the reward on a successful parry being so different emphasizes this best. Both games give you something that allows you to go back on the offensive, but while in Devil May Cry, gaining Devil Trigger Gauge as well as Royal Guard Bar makes you feel empowered, successfully parrying an opponent in Dark Souls simply gives you a way to survive for a little longer. You gain a larger amount of damage, but it's less versatile, and in the long run has less utility. The defensive tools in Devil May Cry are made to empower the player and make you feel like this fight is basically a joke. And the defensive tools in Dark Souls and Dark Souls adjacent properties are designed in such a way where they can make you feel powerful in the correct context. However, they have so many restrictions and resources attached to them that every fight can feel stressful, especially if you're on the back foot. But how do you mix up this formula? There's no way that FromSoft made the same game 5 times. They have to do something to make them stick out from each other. How do you keep the same design philosophy while still making the game feel unique? Well, I have a question for you. Do you want to parry that wolf's bite? Bloodborne is my favorite Souls-like game, and it's the only FromSoft game that I have completed from start to finish. This includes the secret ending where you but it doesn't include the DLC. I've been saving that for a special occasion. It's not like I've not tried other FromSoft games. I nearly put 72 hours into Elden Ring before giving up and deciding to go to the FGC retirement home for how many hours? Anyway, Bloodborne is my favorite entry from FromSoft, despite its limitations. No amount of 30 FPS, no anti-aliasing, and being stuck on the PS4 will make me not love this game to death. And there's one very special reason for that. The parry in this game is literally crash. Yes! Yes! Parrying in this game works differently to how it works in Dark Souls. Shields are basically non-existent in this game. Instead of your offhand, you're going to be wielding the most British weapon of all time. A gun. By shooting an enemy as they're going to attack you, you cause them to stagger, leaving them completely vulnerable like they would be with a parry. There's a couple of differences between a gun parry and a shield parry. The most obvious one is the bullets. If you want to parry your opponent, you have to spend a silver bullet. This generally isn't something you have to constantly check, especially as you're able to gain 5 extra bullets at any time by sacrificing some HP. However, it does mean you have a limited number of parry attempts. So what's the upside then? Well, apart from the fact that you always got the option to parry since your offhand isn't used for anything else, you can now parry every enemy in the game. Almost. Some bosses and other hunters are exempt from this, but you are now encouraged to parry monstrous enemies by shooting them during their attacking frames. By letting you parry more things, you're encouraged to actually go for the parry at every opportunity, with the only downside being if you run out of bullets, you're gonna have to spend some health to get some more. For some players, that's seemingly a punishment for not farming up the resources beforehand, but when you get enough to parry basically everything in the game, you're not gonna be taking that much damage. Not to mention the way that you heal in this game is really fucking cool. At some point in any combat-driven game, you're gonna take damage from something. I know you think you're sick, but it's inevitable. I'm sorry. Taking damage can result in a bunch of different things. However, the most common thing in video games is you lose health. The health bar is an almost unanimous mechanic for most action-adjacent games. It can be represented in a bunch of different ways. Bars, crosses, a red tint on your screen, whatever lets the player know you are fucking dying works. With the inclusion of a health bar, there's a design decision that the developers need to answer. Do we let it go back up? And the answer can vary wildly. Looking back at the Soulsborne games really quickly, all of them have an iconic method of healing. Depending on the game, you're given resources to heal yourself with. Most iconic is the Estus Flask. These flasks are healing potions. You get a limited number of them every time that you use a bonfire. This means that you have a limited number of times that you can heal between sections, so it's important to preserve them as much as you can. Generally, only getting a handful of Estus Flasks at the start of the game. Bloodborne handles this mechanic a tad bit differently, allowing you to carry a maximum of 20 blood vials on you at any time. However, you have a fully limited quantity of them. At maximum, you can store 600 blood vials in the Hunter's Dream, which, when are you ever gonna need 600 blood vials? What are you planning? This sounds like a pain, but you also gain the ability to find blood vials throughout the world by killing enemies. While other FromSoft games make you feel as though you have to retreat and play safe while you're low on healing items, Bloodborne actively encourages you to go out and kill shit, since without doing that, you're not going to be able to heal. By changing the way you go about defending yourself along with how you heal, Bloodborne manages to distinguish itself from the rest of the Soulsborne catalog in a drastic way, encouraging players to play in a more aggressive and proactive gameplay style. There's another way to heal in Bloodborne though. When you take damage, you get a chance to gain health by attacking back. By doing damage right after you're attacked, you're able to heal yourself by a little bit. You don't get all of the health that you lost, but you're able to get a massive portion of it back. This again encourages a more aggressive playstyle. Like a caveman chasing an animal because it stole their meat, you're encouraged to run back to the thing that just hit you and fucking kill it. Next to gun parrying, this is probably my favorite mechanic in the game. In fact, I'm an absolute sucker for lifesteal mechanics like this. If only there was a game that completely embodied this philosophy. While I would absolutely love to go on about Ultra Kill for the next hour, and one day I might, this game has the best example of healing affecting the way that you play the game. It's no lie that Ultra Kill is inspired by the classics before it. Don't believe me? Type devilmayquake.com into your browser. And while you're at it, type your credit card information and social security number in the comments section. This game is an extremely fast-paced, high-intensity shooter that has all the bells and whistles we've come to expect from an action game. Fast dodge? Check. Parry? Definitely. Offensive stuff we've ignored? Oh yeah. But there is a massive part of this game that keeps me coming back. A part that I love with all of my heart. Something that makes me fucking pump out dopamine like nothing else. Oh no, it appears I am on low health. Whatever shall I do? Oh look, a health pack. That's right, similar to Bloodborne, you're able to heal yourself by doing the most therapeutic action known to man. Killing people. Ah, so calming. Whenever an enemy dies in Ultra Kill, their blood flies out of them at high speed. And you, as a really cool robot guy, just happen to run entirely on blood and nothing else. That's the in-game reason. The real way that this mechanic works is depending on how close you are to the opponent, you get more health as they die. If you're too far away, you're not getting shit. And if you're right next to them, yes, yummy HP. It encourages you to jump into the fray and hit as many people as possible. Weapons like the railgun help you lean into this more. The green version causes itself to stick inside the opponent, dealing sustained damage over time. The best part of it though is easily the fact that every tick of damage causes the opponent to bleed heavily. If you play your cards right, this means you can turn a big opponent into a dispenser from Team Fortress 2, allowing you to do whatever you want without the risk of dying. It's sick and cool and sick. Chat hates every time I use this for some reason. This mechanic makes your health less like a traditional health bar and more like a ticking timer from the last time you did damage. If you are low on health, the solution is to go in! Go in! Go! Mechanics that change the way you view HP are fascinating to me and really add some depth to the way that we play games. I could keep going, but I need to get this video out eventually. So I'll close with this. Defense is important, and defensive mechanics are a major part of video games design. The way we go about keeping ourselves alive can change so much about different games. By making us interact with healing and preventing damage in different ways, we have to approach the games differently no matter what our offensive abilities are. And I missed a shit ton of things from different games. So if you'd like to hear me ramble more, maybe subscribe and comment your favorite defensive mechanic. If you really want to support me, I have a Patreon where you can donate as little as £1 a month, and maybe get your name read out alongside these amazing people. As always, a very special thanks to 64MHz, Almost Naptime, Axolotl Syndicate, Daniel Wiedericht, Edison Lottery, Fexo, FL Maxler, Game.png, Haywire Novelite, Hoffmeister Bear, I Am Naoto, It's Riley, Knife and Spoon, Criticat, MP04, Mr. Clen, Nubus, Ray W, Sergeant Cubby, Slimy Gal, Super, Storm SSB, Falcon, Tom Tanks, Velvet Poppy, and Zandatsu for being Tier 2 Patreon supporters. Thank you all for watching, and I'll hopefully see you all in the next video. Bye-bye!